Hello and welcome again to the Ignite Your Leadership Prowess podcast. Usual, I'm your host, Muted Adibowale, and today again we've got a phenomenal guest. I'm sure you're going to love what my guest has got for you. So my guest is Miriam Gilbert. She's a high performance specialist for executives and leadership teams. I'm not going to say too much about Miriam. I'm going to give it to Miriam to introduce herself and tell you about the amazing things she's been doing in the world. Thank you so much, Miriam, for being on the show today. I am so honored to have you here. Can you please
Oh,
introduce yourself and, just let us into your world a little bit?
oh, thank you. Thank you so very much for having me on the show, Lydia. It's a real honor to be here and to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics, the type of topic that I never really quite shut up about, which is about changing corporate cultures around the world. Just a tiny bit of background about me. I'm a German expat living in London, UK, and I've kind of been working with corporates all my professional life, a little bit through accident, really, because when I left university, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. had studied history and politics, which were amazing subjects. I loved them, but I didn't want to become a teacher. And I came across this thing called business advisor. I didn't have a clue what that really was, but I thought, oh, sounds good. I like advising people. So I embarked on a training program, a graduate training program with one of the big four consultancies. I was very surprised to learn that I was going to become a chartered accountant. It
Mm.
was actually an excellent business education. And because of the nature of how I ended up in that role and the nature of how I ended up with that qualification, I got to see a lot of organizations on from the inside. And I got to sit in a lot of important meetings and boardrooms. And I've always been fascinated by people and how people interact and relate to each other, particularly in corporations, because corporations, the way they behave, has such a huge impact on the world, right? So I kind of became a student of human interaction and behaviors. And
Oh,
the thing that I learned was that actually, well, I'm always a positive person, but actually, corporates are full of good people. They're really, really full of good people. So, how come that corporate culture has this really negative
mm.
connotation? And that's been something that's been fascinating me for the last, oh, crikey, 20 odd years, 25 years, in fact, both working inside of corporations as well for the last almost 12 years now as a corporate consultant, helping leaders change the culture in their teams so that they become positive places rather than have that negative, toxic connotation. So, in a nutshell, that's what I'm about. I work with large organizations and the really good human beings inside and help them break out of the structures and constraints that are sometimes put around them in systems that stop them from, flourishing at work.
Oh, that's a really good one, you see. Very, very, how you said it. So I'd just like you to touch on how you define human flourishing in a corporate context. I know you wrote about that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't think there is a one size fits all approach. I'm very much driven by respect for the individual, and we all have different strengths and different weaknesses, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. But I see flourishing when people can pursue their strength and can express themselves through their work, in their work, with the people around them in the way that makes them feel that they are truly stepping into their own potential, and that they are really growing as humans. And that can take many, many different formats. There is no one size. But when they can step into that, then they start to flourish. And good leaders are the ones who pull together people with the different strengths, help them to flourish, and create a team that then becomes something where the team is bigger than just the sum of the parts.
Oh, that is so amazing. The way you've just put it and what the leader has to do, even though, there are lots of people within the team with different strengths and weaknesses, and how that leader puts everything together to make it the actual form, of productivity, of, interactions, of success, and all of those things. Great, that is really wonderful. So what are the key elements that contribute to a workplace where employees can truly flourish?
I would say the first and foremost, the workplace has to recognize that every person is an individual, and like deeply, deeply respect the individual. And I use that word very carefully, because sometimes in big organizations, people can look at teams and not see the individuals in there. They start to treat others a bit like, just cogs in a wheel, just numbers. And I have seen that in places because of my background. I was involved in a lot of big change projects, restructuring, mergers and acquisitions, all of these kind of things. And I have seen how sometimes, say, these consultants that come in from the outside, they just shuffle people around on a spreadsheet as if everyone is just a number. And that shows to me that they're not really respecting that everybody is a human being. Everybody's an individual with a real life. And I think a workplace must absolutely always focus on that fact, even when difficult decisions have to be made, because sometimes they do have to be made, but still respect that individual. And when you respect the individual, then you can start treating people as adults, which unfortunately many corporates don't do. When you are there in the workplace, but you're not allowed to spend, I don't know, £20 on copier paper that's run out, because that's against policy, or similar silly things. But you can start treating people as individuals, as adults. And funny enough, most of the time they will behave like adults as well, responsible, sensible, and so on. And when you have those things in place, then you're off to a really good start, because then most of the time people will start feel responsible to each other, not just the boss, but to each other, and start lifting each other up. And I've seen amazing things happen when teams pull together like that. It's the productivity that can go up, the solutions, like process innovations that are found because people think differently, and feel, they care for each other. And
Well,
then it becomes a really amazing place to work.
oh goodness. The way you just put that, I'm just trying to not forget that, how the leader, how the corporate culture can help in pulling people together, making people responsible to each other. That's a really strong one. That's a really great one. So you talked about, being involved in different change initiatives and,
Yeah.
mergers, acquisitions and stuff like that. So what strategies or initiatives have you found effective in transforming corporate culture?
Um, well, what I know to be literally the best way to transform corporate culture is not to do it to them, but to help the people inside to do it themselves. So really, really stepping away from the traditional consulting approach that comes in, does some analysis, some assessment, then gives a report, and then starts telling people what to do. I've been both involved in projects that did that, and I've also been on the receiving end of those. And it's invariably highly frustrating because the people in the organization feel not really listened to. The consultants have never any way of really knowing more about the organization than the people on the inside.
Mhm.
So they will always miss things, obviously. and the the people don't feel heard. So you create resistance straight from the start. So what I have found is really um, what makes change projects successful is coming in not as a consultant with all the answers, but as somebody who can ask good questions and then help the people on the inside of the organization, the actual employees, help them be empowered to make the change and actually lead the changes that need to be made.
Oh, that is, that's really good. Allowing the people within who actually understand the process and how things have been to be part of the change process.
Absolutely.
That is really powerful. That's really powerful. So I think I'll go to this using the consultant. I think I'll go to that much later. But are you able to share any like success stories regarding where you just talked about change initiatives whereby maybe people were involved in the system to allow the change happen? Do you have any, practical?
Yeah, I would love to share one. My favorite story is I was referred to a team. So I'd been working with one area of the business. We were talking a very, very large business with like 120,000 employees. So I worked with one team, and they referred me to a different team that had had a lot of leadership trouble. They had lost half of their team. All the senior leaders had gone, and the people who were left were disheartened is too mild a word. They were just really demotivated, felt really alienated. Everybody was filling in their their CVs on the side. It was not going well at all. And they came to me and said, well, is there any suggestions that you have? So we worked out a strategy, which were a series of workshops where we could look at individual aspects of what the team actually wanted, what the team saw as its vision and mission, um, how the team would prefer to liaise with each other, like interact with each other, because they were half of them were office based, half of them were out at client sides, and obviously we had hybrid as well, hybrid working on top of it. So the fact that they were in many different places made it difficult for them to feel that they were a team. So and we did a whole series of these workshops, and when I say workshops, it's not sitting in a room. Sometimes it involves being inside of a room, but I generally take people through some experiences, some fun games, or we go for walks and explore different aspects. So we're trying to really take people out of the normal way of thinking. And we went through that and designed a number of changes that they wanted to have, and which is amazing. And what happened was that step by step, they made little tweaks to everything that wasn't quite working for them. Some things so simple, so incredibly simple and yet powerful. For example, it's almost funny. They set up a team WhatsApp. That's it. And some of the team members decided to take it upon themselves to every Monday send a little joke. And everybody just laughed, and then they would follow on. And all of a sudden, that created like a little bit of banter. And it didn't matter where team members were, they could have that little bit of banter. And it added to them feeling as part of a team. And we made a lot of these small changes, and we looked obviously also at some bigger changes, some bigger structural things. But I think it's the power of small tweaks organic that they come up with. I didn't come up with the idea. They come up with it and they empower. And then it's like, maybe we could try this, or maybe we could try that. So they really learn to experiment to address their issues. And when I stopped working with them, around 9 months later, I got a physical letter in the post from the main leader of the team, and inside was a beautifully written letter and a little packet of wildflower seeds with the inscription saying, "The team continues to flourish." They're like,
Oh,
oh, so
bless.
nice.
That's nice. That's really, really powerful. Wow. What an
Yeah.
impact you had on them. It was really, really good.
It made me so happy because, like always, you can see that there's all these really beautiful people, and they're just stuck in a bit of a rubbish situation,
Mhm.
with rubbish dynamics. It's not that any of them are, bad humans, quite the reverse. They're all wonderful people. And they just need a bit of coaching, a bit of help, some ideas, and then they start to flourish.
Exactly. 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 I know you spoke a little bit about, what leaders can actually do to enhance teams, the power of teams and all of that. But I would like you to elaborate a little bit more on, the roles that leaders play fostering a culture of human flourishing in a corporate setting.
Yeah, I again, it's so, in my mind, it's so simple that it's almost embarrassing to say, but it is incredibly powerful. And that is just to make sure that they, the leaders, relate to others on a human level.
Mm.
Actually put themselves into the other person's shoes, have regular conversations. There's, for example, another another case I can share where I was working with a leader who had received, let's put it this way, not great feedback about his communication skills. So basically, he had quite a large team, around 80 people, and he had direct reports and more, but it was still, quite a sizable team. And basically, the feedback was that he wasn't very good at communicating with his team, and we devised a few little changes, which again, some of them were so simple. And I remember saying to him, like, you can literally just change how you communicate, have weekly catch-up calls with your direct reports. It doesn't have to be a formal meeting. Just set aside every week 20 minutes where you just talk to them and say, hey, how's things going? What's up? Get to know them a little bit, you know. And he said, oh, no, I can't change the official forms for, reviews and stuff like that. No. This is not a review. This is just a connecting with people on a human level. And you don't need to become friends, but you're just connecting. And all you need to say is, what's going on? Is there anything I can help you with? Any way I can support you with? If you have something you need their support, instead of saying, like, commanding them to do things, asking, saying, look, this would support me if you could provide this or do that, and have a adult to adult human conversation. And it's simple things like that meant that the next time the annual feedback process was done, he got the best results in terms of on his communication. We did a few other little bits, but they were all on that kind of, this is really simple stuff to do level. He got such good feedback that some of his colleagues go, how did you do that? How did you turn it around? Connecting on a human level. As there we go. So that is for me the ultimate, most important thing that any leader can do. And then when you do that, you're really able to find out what are the strengths of people. Would you like to hear one more story?
Oh, yes, please.
So this is actually in times before I started my own consultancy. This was when I took over as CFO in a company, and I was told by the outgoing CFO that there was somebody who he wasn't quite financial controller level, because the outgoing CFO felt that this person, while actually very talented, was too lazy.
Oh,
And I was like, okay, fine. What am I going to do with a lazy person on my team? I don't really want a lazy person, but okay, I'm inheriting this team and I'm going to work through what needs to be changed and who else I need to hire and all that. But what I found out was actually working with this gentleman. He was quite young, and I found out that he actually was highly frustrated because he had kept making all sorts of suggestions, but was never ever listened to.
mm,
And he had, when I listened to some of his suggestions, I thought, actually, some of them are really good. Some of them were not appropriate, but we had a conversation and I said, like, look, this is why I think it's not appropriate. This is why this can't work. And he said, oh, nobody's ever spoken to me like this. Nobody's ever, you know, given me reason of why. And I don't want to take up too much time with this, but basically, over the 3 years that I was there, he flourished. He took on so much more responsibility. He became my go-to person for anything to do with tax because I don't want to touch tax. That's not my zone of genius. I could 100% rely on him in that. And he completely stepped up to the role of financial controller. So I was, ever so grateful to see how it come from, oh, it's talent, it's a lazy, but sorry, it's a talented but lazy person to, no, this guy is an absolute powerhouse and a absolute pillar for the organization. So
lovely, lovely. And that just tells and shows you how leaders can actually enhance productivity because they can bring out the best and push potential for their team members. I mean, that was a great job you did there. I'm sure you would be really glad, you helped him to bring his full potential, out and change the minds of other people,
yeah,
labeling him as lazy sort of thing.
yeah,
That's
yeah, absolutely.
good. So I'd like you to just say a little bit about how important it is to involve employees in the transformation process, in a corporate organization, if anything was going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, it's in, it's if you don't involve the employees, you're guaranteed to fail. Um, and that's not just my opinion. That has been proven by research that is given as the number one reason why a lot of change projects fail again and again and again. I mean, we all have read the famous McKinsey reports on why do 70 odd percent fail. Well, guess what? Whenever they update it, it's still the same reason. So it just goes to show that involving the employees is absolutely crucial. And it comes down to the fact that only the employees fully understand what I call the shadow organization. And that is the organization of how things really get done. Because we all know, yeah, there's a hierarchy and a structure and processes, etc., etc. But we also know that every large organization has, hidden channels of who influences decisions and how a priority is set and so on and so on. And only the employees fully understand how that is because a consultant would have to live in the organization for years before they fully understand that shadow organization and the culture and how people relate to each other. So why make it hard for yourself and not involve employees, but instead, go there, empower them, really do listen to them. And when you start making them also responsible for the outcomes, guess what? Then everybody starts pulling together and trying to achieve that change, actually trying to make that difference. So I know that for my own work, it's definitely 100% has shown to be the most effective way to create any form of change is by actually getting the people to do it themselves.
That is, that is super, super great. So I know that you talked a lot about involving employees in a change process and a transformation process
Yeah.
that's going on or about to go on, and that will allow, some sort of improvement in the results, engagement in the results. But is that the only thing that actually causes resistance to change initiatives, or what are the other things that may cause resistance to transformation
Yes.
process, change initiatives?
Of course, they are, underneath this process of involving the employees, underneath there's a myriad of other elements that also need to come. And what's fascinating, well, we all know that communication is incredibly important, but what's absolutely fascinating is that I came across research that showed that when it comes to big change projects or any change going on in an organization, no matter what it is, on average, companies under communicate that to the tune of 5 to 10 times. They actually needed to communicate it so much more. No matter how much they're talking about it right now, it's not enough. And that research had led me to conduct my own, non-quite statistical research, but really look at what happens in communication. And the research showed that while an organization is going through big change of whatever nature, chances are that the daily communications that are happening inside that organization, only 3% of that are related to the change. Now, if I wanted my child to do something and I only gave, only told him 3% of all the time that we talk to each other, it'll never happen because it'll just get absorbed in the noise. And I looked at in my own, not quite scientific research, and I looked at the fact that what happens in organizations is that they think of communication as this big official thing that's going one way. The announcements, the town halls, the annual get-togethers, or if it's a change program, the newsletter or the updates on the internal portal site for employees. But what they're not thinking about is what I call communication with a lowercase c, the little chats, the little, is this
Oh,
introduced at a team meeting? Are people talking about it in the break room? The little communications of how we as humans liaise with each other. When we talk about, have you watched the latest installments of Bridgerton? In those kind of conversations, you should be like, oh yeah, this project's happening and that's now affecting this. Oh, okay, let's have a quick chat. It's not necessarily formal communications, the little conversations. When they are done well, everything flows much easier because the change becomes much more organic rather than being done to. So that is something that I know when leaders manage that element, when they do the big communication, the announcements and so on,
yeah.
also the little communications, when they do that well, the change flows. So that's probably the number one thing that I know works.
Great. I can attest to the power of effective communication and not overlooking or underestimating the power of those little
Yeah.
chats and little communications that you talked about.
Yeah.
Wonderful, fantastic. Okay. So what practical advice would you be giving companies just starting on their journey to create a more human-centric culture?
My big advice, and this is the work that I do with my clients, is to, on the one hand, look at where you want to go to. Obviously, you need to have that kind of vision that guides you there, but holding that vision lightly, not being right, we're going to change everything, rip up everything, and plow through this process and force it in, and it has to be this, and each of these steps has to be mentioned. Instead, go like, okay, our path might not be completely straight towards. It might have, a few swirls, a bit like the River Thames going like all around, and still makes it to the sea. And then experiment. Instead of trying to drop in one big solution, experiment of what are the right solutions. And they might be different from team to team. You might have, I don't know, I'm going to go into stereotypes, but say an extroverted marketing team that creates a certain change and ways of getting things done that are not as appropriate to the accounts reconciliation team, for example. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine, because when you find what works for individuals and individual teams, because it fits into their culture, or you can shift the culture towards where it is a healthy, flourishing culture, then you can still aim for that big vision, but you avoid a lot of the resistance of a one size fits all approach. So that's what I recommend. I take my leaders through a process where I let them experiment themselves with the power of rapid feedback loops, with the power of rapid design solutions. And I don't mean, physical design. I mean mental design, process designs, etc. And that process, taking them through that, tends to be when they go, oh, wow, yeah, this has given me straight away some ideas of how we could do things very, very differently. And then they can take that process, and we'll take it to some teams and go with them through it. And they'll generally come up and like, oh, right, okay, now we can make these changes. And I always like to approach it like, yes, there is that big vision, and we know we will have to do some big things along the way, but you cover big distances by taking one step after another, little steps. Always think of, what could we do differently on Monday morning when we come into the office? What could we do practically different at that time? And that will lead us to that bigger step. And that's where the experimentation comes in.
Oh, wow. That is so insightful, very practical. So are there any resources or tools that you can recommend to companies trying to navigate or looking to make this shift?
Yes, actually, there is. First up, I have to briefly mention the book that changed everything for me in my consulting business. And it's absolutely incredible. And it's actually very practical as well, because there are practical guidelines in the book of how you can implement the changes. The book, unfortunately, does not have the most exciting title, but that should not put anybody off. It is called Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux. And in that book, he, as an ex-McKinsey consultant, describes a set of real world case studies, big companies around the world that are operating on a completely different paradigm to any other organizations. They are operating on a paradigm that they are driven by their employees, that they're highly successful, like successful against the odds, and experience incredible growth and productivity without any of the traditional structures and processes. So, for example, my favorite company, and I actually met the CEO a couple of times of that company, is a Dutch firm in the healthcare space. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it correctly because the name is too hard. Jutso. Anyway, they have grown from, in 2007, they started with 10 employees, 10. And the last time I checked, there were 14,000 employees. And this is a few years ago, so they might very well be bigger. They did that without a growth strategy, without a central planning department, without really going, like doing any of the traditional things. Now, for those 14,000 employees, They have a head office of 60 people. And they have no managers. They have no people who schedule work, who set plans, who do anything like that. They have none of these things. They operate in a really beautiful, different way. And because they are definitely a place where people can flourish, that's how they've grown so quickly, because people constantly want to come and work there.
Wow, wow. I mean, that is so magnificent how you describe the process of, how they're working, how they grew from 10 staff members to 14,000. They must be doing something, that's really different to many organizations. And that quickly, I'd love us to go to the AI aspects of it. Remember you wrote that in, the rollout of AI. How do you think that is affecting or impacts, changing the culture of organizations, or will impact the culture of
Yeah,
organizations?
and I think, I mean, I love using AI. It's been incredible for my own productivity. And I can see organizations being really at a crossroad. And there's two ways, like one or two ways they can go. Um, One way, which I hope most will not, is that they think, oh, AI can just replace a lot of people. It can't. Not experts, it can't. It can do a lot of things fast, but you still need to be an expert to evaluate if the output's any good. Um, but those companies, they're the ones who don't treat their people as humans, as they don't have the respect for that human element. And they are the same kind of organizations that installed monitors on people's laptops during the pandemic when people were working at home and all of that kind of, And guess what? These organizations never see the biggest results in terms of productivity, do they? And when companies approach AI from that perspective, they will learn two things. They will learn that in that way, AI is incredibly demotivating, not just for the people that they're cutting, obviously, but also for everybody else. And we all know what happens when motivation and engagement goes down. Companies don't do well. There is the other side of AI adoption that looks at AI as a tool that enhances what people can get done. And that is great. I mean, it's a bit like when, I vaguely remember even the time when Excel became the ultimate spreadsheet tool, and, how much it changed organizations, but it didn't get rid of people. Instead, people became really productive. And, we all know that actually most of the world's run on spreadsheets, right? So it's when organizations look at what the power of AI could do and empower their people to experiment with it, obviously in a safe way, they have guidelines and things, but that's fine. And help them to explore it, experiment, to really come up with innovation, reward them for innovation, reward them for the fact that if they have improved a process that used to take, I don't know, 3 weeks, and now it can be done in half an hour, reward them and not say, oh, well, that means your job is gone. Because let's face it, if you can show me an organization that's where people get everything done that's on their to-do list, I'd be amazed. There's always more work, right? So if we can get rid of some of the more drudgery work, we can spend time on the higher quality work. And companies that are approaching AI with that mindset, they will see big, big boosts.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. That's a really top-notch way of looking at it. Thank you so much for that. We're kind of running out of time, but I'd love to see, because I can see your passion for what you do and how you help companies. I just want to know what motivates you to keep going on this journey.
What motivates me is I I guess it's the fact that, well, I like to flourish in my life. I want the same for my child. I want the same for everybody's children. I want the same for my husband and everybody I know. And I know that work can well, we spend so much time there. So work can be a great place, or a place of, you know, a source of depression and sadness. Now, the other thing I also know is that when people feel happier at work, when they feel satisfied with their work, when they feel that they're making a contribution, not only is it good for them and their immediate families and the companies, of course, we know that, but it's actually, they also make more ethical decisions. So they will actually look at, say, processes and think, oh, is that is that an ethical way of conducting business? Let's say you're a leader in a retail business. When you feel happier in your work and the culture is good, there is a higher chance, research has shown that there's a higher chance that you will check out your supply chain to make sure that they're not using forced labor or child labor or something like that. So you literally make more ethical decisions. And that is definitely good for the world. So that's my biggest motivator. Like, when we change corporate culture, we can literally change the world.
Oh, fantastic. When we change corporate culture, we can literally change the world. So changing corporate culture, changing lives positively.
Absolutely.
That's a good one. Thank you so much, Miriam. I'm so, so pleased for you coming on the show today. And that is where we're going to put an end to the Ignite Your Leadership Prowess podcast. But today, I mute it at Deboale. And until I see you again, just keep being the best of who you are. Thank you for watching.